lot of guys, the difference that separates Kobe Bryant, you tell me if I'm wrong, a lot of guys pucker up and now they're passing. They don't want to take the shot.
Right.
They don't want to have another next miss. So they become hesitant in the next thing. What is something strategically that you have in the book that helps someone transition to the next play? What do you do?
Well, we call it a whiteboard memory. It's as if whatever was written on the whiteboard, we just erase it immediately. Great shooters like Kobe, for example, they don't allow the negative energy from the first 8 misses to affect the 9th shot. They shoot the 9th shot as if they had made the first 8. And you can only do that if you have a very short-term memory, which is incredibly important. The other thing is we can't let our feelings and our emotions dictate our behaviors and actions. If we do that, we become inconsistent by definition. We're human beings, and we're going to experience every single emotion under the sun. And I'm of the belief there are no bad emotions. Every emotion serves a purpose for us. But we have to be very careful in letting our emotions drive the car and in letting them dictate how we behave. If I'm only kind and thoughtful and generous when I'm in a good mood, well, that means probably half of my life I'm going to be the exact opposite of those things. So I want to make sure that I'm not allowing my emotions or how I feel in the moment to dictate my behavior and actions. And it's the same thing. I would want a player to be disappointed that they missed their first 8 shots. I mean, let's not forget the name of the game is put the ball in the basket. And as much work as they've put in, it's okay if they're disappointed that they missed those 8 shots. But they can't let that disappointment dictate their behavior. They can't let it dictate their actions. They can't let it dictate how they shoot that 9th shot. So the ability to separate how we feel from the standard of how we perform and the standard of how we show up, to me, that's a crucial component of next play.
Is it like the fragility of some people's identity and confidence that causes this to be the case? In other words, because I'm think even if you transition out of sports, I just think of like business people that I know. I've just been around people like they've missed 3 or 4 sales in a row. They're almost like, well, odds are I'm getting the next one. But a lot of other people like, oh, I've lost momentum. Maybe I was a fluke. Like most people's confidence or their identity is very fragile. It's predicated on results all the time.
Yes, and that's what. And you're so insightful. And that's where the pitfall is. We cannot attach our self-worth and our self-belief to the outcomes, because by definition, we don't control outcomes. Now, you know me, I'm a process-oriented guy. I would much rather my identity be tied to the process, to my effort, to my attitude, to the things that I have control over, as opposed to outcomes, because we don't control those. You don't control the sale. What you do control is, did you put yourself or your product and service in the best position to be of service to someone else? Did you qualify the right prospect and you're asking the right questions of the right people? If you do that, you will tend to get more sales than not, but you still don't have ultimate control over it. And once again, I'm all about consistency. If I'm only confident and have self-belief when I'm getting the outcomes I want, then when I don't, then the confidence goes down. And I want confidence to be a controllable factor. And I'm a believer that confidence comes from a few different areas. The one that I've learned from you is it comes from keeping the promises we make to ourselves. If you tell yourself you're going to get up at 6 a.m. and go for a jog, if you wake up and do that, your confidence starts to build. If you hit the snooze and you pull the covers over your head, your confidence starts to erode. Confidence also comes from demonstrated performance. The reason Kobe was such a confidence player is because he put in more work during the unseen hours than arguably anybody else on the planet. He's seen the ball go through the basket when no one else is watching, which that demonstrated performance then carries over when the lights are on. And then the last one is the little voice that we have inside of our head, our self-narrative and our self-talk. And if anyone watching or listening right now says, I don't have a little voice in my head, well, who do you think just said that to you? It's the little voice in your head. So we all have it. And do you talk to yourself in an empowering, a constructive way, with compassion, or do you talk to yourself in a very critical and judgmental way? And how we talk to ourselves dictates how we feel about ourselves. So if we can do those 3 things, and those are all controllable, we can build confidence.
Let's talk. You did this in the last show, but it was a long time ago, and people might not have heard it. I think I work pretty hard, but
I would agree.
And I think in the business sense that I do. But I also thought I worked pretty hard in the gym, and then I went and trained with a couple guys that are former Mr. Olympias, and it was like, oh, there's levels to this thing.
Yes.
Right. There's levels, and I don't. I mean, just flat out, I couldn't hang.
Sure.
And I think a lot of times you think you're working hard if you're listening to this. Compared to what? Compared to the 3 people in your cubicle, or compared to the greatest of all time in your craft? Right. Like compared to what? Or compared to your capacity. And so I think this Kobe story that you told me on the last show is just indicative, because I think a lot of athletes this is athletes, but they think they work hard.
Yeah.
And then there's guys in the NBA that work hard. Then there was Kobe. Tim Grover told me on the show, I said, what was the difference between Kobe and Jordan?
Yeah.
And he goes, two hardest working guys by a mile I ever had.
Yep.
He goes, I could actually persuade Michael at some point to leave the gym. And he said, in Kobe's case, I'd persuade him to leave, and then I'd find out he'd come back.
Yeah.
Like he was just a level that was just beyond. Tell him the Kobe story. Do you remember the story you told me about getting to you know this story?
Do I remember it? Yeah. I almost every single keynote that I've given in the last 10 years, I start with the Kobe story because it was such a fundamental experience for me and how it shifted my perspective. And what I'll do is I'll give you the abbreviated version of the Kobe story, and then I'll tell you the part 2, which I know we talked about last time, but it's one that I rarely tell, but it really glues everything together.
Okay.
So
awesome,
in 2007, Nike hired me to work the Kobe Bryant Skills Academy. Nike was starting a series of events where they wanted their flagship athletes to be able to have an impact on the top high school and college players. And I got a chance to watch one of Kobe's really early morning workouts. I mean, he was in the gym at 3:30 in the morning. I mean, keep in mind, for most NBA players in the offseason, 3:30 in the morning is when you're coming home from something, from the club or from the bar. Right. And that's when he's starting his day. But the most impressive was not just the wake up time and the start time, but it was his relentless obsession and commitment to the fundamentals. Like, he was working on moves that, I kid you not, I had taught to middle school age players. Now, he was doing it with an unparalleled level of intensity and just an incredible level of detail and precision and focus. But it wasn't the stuff that he was doing that was remarkable. It was the way that he was doing it. And he always knew that working on mastery of the fundamentals was the foundation to which everything else was built. And when I asked him about it later at camp, that's when he said something that, I kid you not, still puts the hairs on my neck, makes them stand up, and it changed my life forever. I said, Kobe, you're the best player in the world. Why were you doing such basic drills this morning? And he smiled and he winked and he said, well, why do you think I'm the best player in the world? It's because I never get bored with the basics. And that line of I never get bored with the basics changed everything for me. As a young coach, honestly, I had the arrogance to think that there were things that were beneath me, things that I didn't need to do. And then here I meet someone who's world-class at his craft. And if he can tell me that the reason he's world-class is because of his attention to the basics, then who am I to ever skip them? So for me right now, in every area of my life that I aim for excellence, whether it's being a father, being a speaker, being a friend, being a business owner, I identify the 4 or 5 key fundamentals that will allow me to be excellent in that area, and I work relentlessly towards mastery of them. Now, with that, I can say with a huge smile, I'm not coming from a place of mastery on any of that stuff. But what I can say with an equally huge smile is I'm making progress and I'm moving in the right direction. And I can sit here with you right now and tell you I am a better man in every area of my life than I was the last time I saw you a couple years ago on your show. So I'm going in the right direction. I'm not there yet. And truthfully, I never will be, but I'm moving in the right direction. But the second half of that Kobe story, which I rarely tell, is the reason Kobe decided to get up so early in the morning was he had already identified that his competition in the NBA, if he took the upper 10% of players in the NBA, that they were going to work out twice a day during the offseason. The mediocre players in the NBA are going to work out once. The really dedicated ones work out twice. And Kobe said to himself, well, if I only do what everyone else is doing, how will I create any separation? How will I create, improve above them? So he said, if they're going to work out twice a day, I have to work out 3 times a day. And he said, the only other way I can fit that in is by getting up extra early. So in his mind, he said, when I'm coming home from workout number 1, you're getting to the gym for your workout number 1. I'm always one step ahead of you. But the part that I loved, he said, in one off season, that might not create much separation. But you start to stack years, and in his case, played almost 20 years, you create separation that no one can ever catch. And the most important part, though, that I want to make sure your listeners and your viewers understand, I'm not saying that more is always better. In fact, more is rarely better. Better is better. So it's not just that Kobe did more work. It was also his attention to detail and the quality of the work that he put in. An hour for him is not the same as an hour for other players. It's kind of like at work. The average person works, an 8-hour workday. But how much are they actually working? Studies show you're working like 3 hours out of 8 because the other 5 is fluff. Kobe's 60 minutes of dedicated work is 60 minutes of dedicated work. And when you can pack that kind of punch, then, your efficiency and your effectiveness is just unmatched.